Good afternoon, Patrick. Thank you very much for joining the Overseas Athlete.
Hey Chris, cheers. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Yeah, quite excited about this one, to be honest. I know that you've been to, 3 or 4 different countries now to chase your football dream. So we'll dive into that. But just to get us started, if you could just let everyone know where you came from, like from a football point of view, and where you currently are and playing.
Yeah, so I grew up in Sydney in a little town called West Pymble. Started playing there with my juniors, and then I went through to Blacktown City, and from there went on through to Sydney. And I was in the youth team there, and then I had a few the kind of sniffs and training with the first team, but I never made it through. So I actually ended up going over to Thailand, and I played about a half a season over there. Then I came back to Sydney with the first team for a couple of seasons, before going on loan for a little stint with Brisbane, and then off to India, and now I'm over in Korea with Songnam FC.
Well, so you've seen a fair bit in a couple of years.
Yeah, I know, for a short career that I've had so far, which has been good. I've been able to see quite a lot.
And how, well, I mean, there's loads of countries to talk about there. We'll start at the beginning. Leaving Sydney to go to Thailand, how did that come about? You said you were in the youth team at Sydney, and just not getting a run?
Yeah, so I spent 3 years with the youth team at Sydney, and we had a pretty good run as a youth team there. We ended up winning the NPL2 the first year we were in it, and the MYL as well. And it was at a time when the first team was having really good success as well. I think they won the double or the treble even one of those years. So it was a bit hard to break into the first team at the time. And so once my youth team time had finished up, because obviously you could only play till you're 21, I wasn't really too sure what I was going to do. And the club actually had approached me at the time, the CEO, Danny Townsend, who knew a guy, Dave Mitchell, an ex-Socceroo, really nice bloke, Dave, legend. And he had a contact over in Thailand and said, look, do you want to go and check it out? He said, I know it might not sound too fancy or whatever. It was the second division in Thailand. There's a team there. But I know the coach and the technical director, you're looking for a player, etc. And to be honest, at the start, I was kind of a bit weary going, I don't know, like second division in Thailand. Maybe I'm better off waiting or going back to the NPL and playing in a year. But in the end, I thought, I've got nothing to lose. So I went over for a week's trial. And it's still, even after that trial, they said that we want you. But I was still a bit kind of not too sure. And luckily, technical director at the time and the coach, they let me come back to Australia and speak to mum and dad and my family about it. And I think the next day after I got back from Australia, I called them back and said, all right, let's do it. I'm just going to give it a crack. And I'm really glad I did, because it was awesome.
Yeah, what were the, you can imagine, how old were you then? You just turned 21?
Yeah, I'd just been 21, yeah.
So what were the main concerns you had with I suppose going to Thailand? Was it more so it was the Division 2 side of it, hoping that you'd obviously be progressing to the A League, but having to take maybe a backward step to go forward again?
Definitely, that was definitely a part of it. I'd had a little bit of experience in Asia with the youth teams, with the young Socceroos and whatnot, just to see what it's about traveling. But you don't actually get to see what the leagues are like. You obviously see the national teams and whatnot. But I hadn't had any experience with any of the leagues over in Southeast Asia. And I think especially knowing it was the second division and hoping, like you said, that I was aiming for the A League, I was thinking, maybe it's too big a drop down or whatever. But much to my surprise, the league over there it probably is a little bit lower than the A League standard, but it's still a good standard, and it's a different style of football, and it's really not easy to adjust to. I was really lucky when I went over. I had a guy in my team, a Kiwi guy, Kane Vincent, who spent a lot of his career in Asia, and I think he's maybe 9 or 10 years older than me, and he was really helpful to be able to guide me in my time there. Because, at the time, looking back, I was only 21. You don't really know what you're kind of getting yourself into. And and really thinking back now as a 21-year-old, you don't see many 21-year-old foreign players in those Asian leagues, especially in my position as a centre half. So considering that, I was really lucky to get that opportunity. And yeah, it was just an eye opener. I learned a lot of things over there. It was really good.
Yeah, I bet you did. And it's interesting that the opportunity came up from the club, like through Sydney FC and the CEO. I wouldn't imagine, I don't know, but I wouldn't imagine that would happen too often if you've come to an end of a deal. You know, you do think, or I suppose the assumption is that it's an agent that drives it for you, or players are looking for it themselves. So it's good to hear that that's where it came from.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting as well for me at the time, but it was really good in the sense that they were looking to help for me as well, because they kind of said, look, we like you as a player and whatnot, but we don't really have much room for you. You know, the first team we're doing really well. There's not really much spot, so we're going to try and do what we can to try and help you, I suppose, so you don't just kind of go off the radar. And yeah, luckily they had a few contacts, and through Dave, who was able to help me to get over there and continue my career. Because to be honest, if I didn't go over there and I went back to the NPL, I might not be where I am now today. So
yeah, and it's no doubt they were difficult conversations to hear when Sydney pull you in and just sort of say, you know, thank you, but we don't have a spot for you in the first team. Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, that's all a part of football, really. And as you get older and whatnot, and you experience all that stuff, you realise that's just a part of it. And I guess the only thing you can do is kind of move on, accept it, move on, and you just got to keep working and keep pushing to find something. I mean, if you really want it, you can get it, kind of thing. And I think for me, the step I knew to take me to the next level, or to stay as a professional footballer, I knew I had to go over to Thailand and take that opportunity, because it's very difficult, especially back then and now as well. You see a lot of players from youth teams, they go back from the youth teams and they can't get a spot in the A-League team, and they go back to the NPL and they just can't get another shot in the A-League. Not that it's their fault, but whether there's just not enough teams and there's not enough contracts and whatnot. Not that they're not ready to play in the A-League, or not good enough for the A-League.
Yeah, well, that's it. This has come up again with a couple of people. It's like the numbers, obviously, you've only got the 12 teams or so. You've got youth team that you're trying to promote some. You'll bring in some foreigners. There's guys there already on contracts. It's not like there's a lot of spaces available.
Yeah. Excuse me. 100%. And that's the difference I have seen also over in Asia and compared to back home. I mean, even in Thailand, they've got 4 full divisions. First 2 being professional, third and fourth semi-pro. But those teams from the third and fourth can push up into the first division, and that actually happened with my old club in Thailand recently. They dropped down to the third division after I left, and they actually dissolved as a club, but formed with another team. And they got back-to-back promotions, and now they're in the first league. Wow. And I suppose that's something that we've always lacked back home, and I think everyone is aware of that. But I think the FFA is doing their best at the moment to kind of push for that national second division, and it's really growing. I think you can see with the Tillies the other night, with that penalty shootout win, it was just massive, wasn't it? And you can see everyone's getting behind it, so it's awesome, really, for both the men's and the women's, just for footy back home, I reckon.
Oh, definitely. The growth and the support that they've had in these last couple of weeks has been incredible. And like the games have been intense. Like you're feeling sick watching them. You're so nervous. But it's been amazing. And yeah, hopefully like that, it's something else which adds to growing the game overall. Grow the A-League, grow the W League. Socceroos done well. Matildas are doing amazing. So it's all going in the right direction. Let's just hope we get enough support, behind it to keep that going.
100%. 100%.
So going into your actual, I suppose, the behind the scenes of heading to Thailand as a 21-year-old, what did that look like for you? I suppose the first week and the culture shock, and then what did you have to arrange to get yourself over there in regards to visas or passports and bank accounts and bits and pieces?
Yeah, so for the first week when I went over for the trial, visas and stuff was okay because Thailand, I think you get a month at least holiday visa, which was good, and I was just going over for the week. Um, and that was another thing I had to do at the time. I had to organise my own flights over there to pay for them, which was, I suppose, another risk I was taking. Um, and then once I got over there, the club was good. They sorted out the hotel and everything for me. I was lucky at the time, like I said before, the TD was English, Mark Hilliard, really good guy, who was able to sort everything out for me. And that, I suppose, really helped me as well. I think thinking back, maybe if there wasn't any English speaking people and it was only Thai people working at the club, it might have been a bit different for me. But that really helped, I suppose, definitely as a younger player, just to have that person who was able to speak English and to connect to, and with the coach as well, with Jason. And then once I ended up signing and going back, they had sorted out visas and everything for me. They flew me over. I think I just had to we had to go to Malaysia, which is pretty common over there. You have to fly in because you start in on the 1 month holiday visa. Then once that's about to turn up, because they sort all the papers whilst you're out there, that first month training, then they'll fly you over and you stay a couple of days, go to the Thai embassy in another country, and then they'll sort out your proper visa and then fly you back and just get back into training and whatnot.
So once they'd agreed or offered you a contract that you'd accepted from there, they'll then take on the costs of getting you back there, sorting out your visa and accommodation and those types of things?
Yeah. They sorted out, flights, visa, accommodation. I had to sort out myself that first year of the contract. I think I had a second year option in my contract where the accommodation may have been included. I can't remember thinking back now, but it's not uncommon.
But all in all, a very good experience.
Yeah, it was really good. I think that the most important thing for me was just to be playing football professionally week in, week out. That was my main goal going over there and just playing. I think I ended up getting 18 or 19 games in, and I ended up leaving halfway through the season when Sydney had called me to come back, which was another decision I had to kind of think about at the time, because I knew going back to Sydney I wasn't going to be coming in as a starting player. I knew it was going to be maybe a bit of a risk coming back home, and I do sometimes think I wonder what could have been if I'd stayed over in Thailand and kept playing. But I guess that's all part of it as well, isn't it? You never know what could have been. So I ended up making that decision to come back home and stuck with it.
So that's been two pretty big risks you've taken in a short period of time. But going on to the Thailand thing, so even Division 2 over there, it was a full-time professional contract, training every day, getting paid decent money, I'm assuming?
Yeah. So it was full-time, professional. We had a good setup. Obviously, our coach Jason had played in the English Premier League, so he had pretty good experience. He'd coached with Arsenal Women's previously. So everything that he had put into the pre-season, the training was really professional, and it was really good setup. He actually was fired, I think, within maybe 10 or 12 games. Oh, his position changed, sorry, to the CEO, and they brought in a Thai coach because the team wasn't doing too well. And that was a lot different, coming from, having this English guy with a style I'm kind of used to back home, coaching and stuff like that, and then having a Thai coach come in, which was a lot different, his style of coaching and methodology. There's another thing to get used to, but it was good in a way because you get to experience what it's like. Because obviously in Thailand there's a lot. Not every coach is foreign, and there's a lot of Thai coaches. And it was good to see, I suppose, their way of thinking and the way they see football. It's a lot different to the way we see it and the way we play and the way they train. So yeah, that was a good experience too.
And what were the biggest differences you found when you've sort of switched from one coach to another?
I think definitely with the Thai coach, he was a lot more, I suppose you could say, old school. Longer sessions. just little kind of things, I suppose, in the style of his play. He was a lot more direct, whereas before, the previous coach wanted to play a lot more, I suppose, football kind of brand where you're keeping the ball. Just things like that in terms of your training sessions. It was a little bit different, I suppose, in the style of play.
And how did you find yourself? So one of the points that you'd made when you sent over to me, and this might be at a later date, but because you would have been young then, but overseas, like your body and your health and taking care of that in a foreign country, injury prevention and illness. How was that when you first went across there in regards to obviously new diet, I suppose, and different foods and different routines? How did you manage all that?
Yeah, so we were quite lucky. We had a Italian physio actually who started with us at the start of the season, and I think he may have left about halfway through as well. So he was really good in terms of that stuff, in terms of injuries and whatnot. But I learned as well a lot from my mate Kane, the Kiwi guy who had obviously been playing in Asia a lot, and he said, the standards are a lot different here in terms of physiotherapy and sports science. It's not like it is back home. I think Australia is like the top 1 or 2 in the world, I think, in terms of sports science and physiotherapy. So he said, you got to, I suppose, keep your own standards of well-being in terms of injuries. Make sure you do your own routine and whether it's rehabilitation, post-game recoveries, eating the right food and stuff like that. And in terms of nutrition, it was a bit different to start with, but I was able to cook myself at home. We didn't actually have I suppose, a proper clubhouse in Thailand, so they brought food, but it wasn't compulsory to be eating that. You could just go home and eat. So I was able to, I suppose, watch my diet by myself back home. And yeah, I suppose it's things not only you have to learn over there, but even here in Korea or back home in Australia, you need to do those things in terms of keeping your body right. Those things when you're away from the training ground. I suppose I just had to learn it over in Asia in a different environment.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? I've had a couple of guests on now who have been to Asia or in different countries, and they say it's the stuff that they were doing off the field which they feel really helped them. Like it's a big step going there to play, but when you're in an environment like that where it might not all be set up, you might imagine at a Sydney FC or a big club that the lunch is there, the cafeteria is there, the physios, everything's in-house. It's easy to do it. It's a lot harder, I guess, to do it yourself. As everyone knows, to work out at home is more difficult to mentally get prepared for that and stick in a good routine.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right, back home and stuff, when you've got everything there for you or you're being told to do it by the coaches or by the physical coach, it's a lot different rather than, I suppose, it's your own responsibility to do it when you're in other countries in Asia and stuff where that may not be available, or you may not have that coach who's telling you to do it or the importance of doing it. And I think it's, at the end of the day, it's your own responsibility as a player to be able to take care of your body and your nutrition and whatnot. Especially, I suppose you could say back home in the Western world where it's, I suppose it's more common and stuff to do that. It's a lot different over in Asia and Thailand and stuff, for sure.
Do you find the players over there, like the local players, didn't do it as much as say the foreigners that come in?
It's hard to say. I suppose I wouldn't have known too much about their, I suppose, life off the pitch, post-training and stuff. But for example, pre-training, there were definitely a lot of the times it was the foreign players doing prehabilitation, stuff like that, injury prevention before training, whereas a lot of the Thai boys would kind of rock up and get straight onto the field.
Yeah, probably. And again, as you said, it's probably from an educational point of view of that Western world, or where you've been brought up, maybe in an academy or with a good level of coaching and a lot of facilities that might not be available to the locals. Yeah,
100%. That's probably the biggest reason, I suppose. Like you said, it's just that from an education standpoint, they haven't been told, that if you do this pre-ab before training, that you're going to have less risk of an injury on the field and stuff like that. the how can you say they just have less opportunity, I suppose, to that education as we do back home.
Do you find that? Have you seen it at bigger clubs, like say a top club in Thailand that might have a bit more money? Do you find that they have those facilities and education?
Yeah, I definitely I haven't actually seen it firsthand, but from seeing, I suppose, videos on the internet, and I did have a mate who also he worked as an S&C with Buriram, which is probably the biggest club over in Thailand. He worked with their academy, and he used to put up a lot of videos of what he was doing with those kids. And we're saying from, say, 12 to 16. And he was going through proper gym routines and etc., rehabilitation exercises, whatnot, with those kids who are at that academy. Whereas if you're going to another club, for example, in the second division, they might not, first of all, not even have an academy. But second of all, they definitely wouldn't have, a coach showing those kids at that age what you need to be doing once you become a pro, 17, 18, 19, to take care of your body and whatnot, which is, I suppose, the most important time to learn is at that age, 12 to 16, to learn those habits.
Yeah, when your body's growing and changing so much. Fantastic, mate. That's and how did the conversation on the move then back to Sydney FC come? Do you say you were halfway through the season with the Thai team?
Yeah, so we were about halfway through, and we'd had quite a lot of change. Like I said, we had a new coach who came in, and we had a lot of new Thai players come in at that halfway transfer window, the mid-season transfer window. And we were sitting, I think, bottom or second from the bottom as well, so the season wasn't doing too well. But with those new players who came in, we'd kind of changed it a little bit, and we were back on the up a little bit, I suppose you could say. And I ended up getting a call from Steve Corica and Rob Stanton, the coaches at the time from Sydney, and they said, look, would you be interested in coming back and whatnot? And I was, obviously, I think Sydney had won the championship the year before against Perth in the grand final. And so I knew Sydney were in a good place. They had a lot of good players. And I had to kind of think, do I want to stay here in Thailand? And, we're not doing too well. We could get relegated to the third division, which is then, it's not even full-time professional, it's semi-pro. What would I do? And Sydney had a 2-year offer on the table for me, so I ended up taking that. And like I said before, and knowing the risk that I might not end up playing, but I ended up just taking the risk, I suppose, going back and just seeing what happened over those 2 years.
Yeah, as you said earlier, there's nothing like playing, and I suppose when you've left the youth league in Sydney and in Australia, to be playing full-time professionally against adults every week, no doubt helps your game immensely. So yeah, I suppose that would have been a big decision to go back knowing that you're coming in probably as a squad player. Got to work hard, but at least the opportunity's there, and I suppose a 2-year deal with a bit of financial security and contract security makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the other thing as well. In Thailand with our team as well, there'd been talks. I'm not sure whether it happened or not, but we'd lost a few sponsors and stuff like that. Some Thai players apparently may not have been getting paid at all, or their full salary at the time as well, which was a thing I had to think about as well, whether they were actually going to be able to pay me for those next 5 or 6 months that I had left on my contract until the end of the season, which is another thing which happens over in Southeast Asia as well, because a lot of these clubs, they're not backed by big financial corporations or whatnot. So financial security was definitely a thing for me as well, coming back home, knowing that I was at least going to be paid. And that was definitely a thing I had to think about at the time.
And did you have to negotiate out of your contract in Thai to move back at that point, because you were roughly halfway through a season?
Yes, they didn't want to let me go, actually, when I first went in. And I ended up having to speak to the old coach who was there, who was then at the time the CEO, or CEO they placed him as, Jason, and he said, look, I think if you really want to get out of here, you've got to go to them and just say, because I think I just finished the month, or I was just about to get paid. I said, all right, we'll just take that whole month's pay. I don't want it. And then they ended up rolling the red carpet out for me and said, no worries, you can go, kind of thing. So they didn't make it too difficult at the time.
How difficult would that have been if Jason hadn't been there, who you could, I suppose, speak English to quite comfortably, and you knew him? If you had to go into a Thai CEO or a Thai technical director, how difficult would it be to get out of a contract like that, do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think as well, because they had already, my mate Kane, the Kiwi player, he'd left, I think maybe 3 weeks earlier or 4 weeks earlier as well. He ended up leaving to another club. He didn't want to stay. We lost another foreign player as well in that transfer window. Yeah, it definitely could have been hard, because the actual CEO of the Thai, and I mean, I was lucky in the sense that they did let me go, because they could have just turned around and said, no, we want to keep you. And even possibly they might have said, oh, well, we're not going to play you now either, because you want to leave or whatever. But luckily they were good enough to kind of let me go. I think I did end up speaking with him, the Thai CEO at the time, and just said, look, I've got this opportunity to go back home, and the club went on such a good situation. I need to get back home and stuff like that.
And were you handling all this by yourself, or did you have an agent at that point?
Yeah, I did have an agent who was helping me, Paddy Dominguez, at the time.
Is he from Australia? Was he someone you knew from here? Yeah. Excellent. I suppose that might have made it a little bit easier. It'd be very daunting to go into a room like that as a youngster and try and negotiate your way out of a contract.
Yeah, for sure. I was definitely speaking with Kane as well at the time, and had asked kind of how he'd gotten out of his contract, because he ended up going to another Thai club, and that's what they had said to me. They said, as kind of, I suppose, an ultimatum, they said, you can leave, but as long as you're not going to another club here in Thailand, that's fine. Which I suppose is fair enough. If I was going to leave on a free transfer and then go to another Thai club, understandably they wouldn't be happy about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So then it brings you back to Sydney FC on a 2-year deal. How did that all work out for you?
Yeah, the 2 years of Sydney was really good. It was highs and lows for me, because as a team we did really well. That first season we won the premiership and the championship, which was awesome. The only thing for me in those 2 years was lacking was game time, which was hard as well, I suppose, because we were doing really well as a team, and it was hard to break into, and understandably. Looking back now, it's hard to say. I mean, maybe I should have tried to go somewhere earlier after the first year. It's hard to say, and you never know really as well, because anything can happen in football at any time. Someone can get injured or suspension, etc., etc. You never know when your time's going to come. So unfortunately, I didn't get as many games as I wanted to. But it was just good to be in an environment with a winning team, with players, experienced players there at Sydney, to learn from them and how they go about it, and the culture that was created at that club, which I think really helped us to win the double at the time. It was really probably started from the culture that we had built there.
And do you think, I know it's difficult because you always say playing is the best way, obviously to learn, but I guess being in a good environment with a good culture, as you say, with experienced players and having success, no doubt as a young player, that must just be, it's a different type of education, isn't it? I mean, you want to be playing, but no doubt I'd imagine that's probably been a good thing for you, just being in and around that.
Yeah, for sure. I think you can learn from a lot from players, even through training and just watching their actions on the field. But I definitely think that as a player personally, the best way for improvement is to be about playing games. There's nothing more that's going to improve you than when you're on the park yourself and you can learn from what you're doing and whatnot. But that it was definitely hard for me at times, not being able to play and just trading and whatnot. I suppose it taught me as well just to keep mentally strong and disciplined, knowing that eventually I'll get my chance. And that was a big part for me, I suppose, in those 2 years, just staying mentally strong.
And did you see out the full 2 years of your Sydney deal, and then where did you go from there?
Yeah, so I towards the end of my contract with Sydney, I went to Brisbane for like a short loan. I was able to go for a bit. I wanted to go, I think, until the end of the season, but I was only let by Sydney to go for 2 weeks in the end. But even that short stint was good for me. I actually played, I think, the same amount of games in those 2 weeks with Brisbane than I did with Sydney in 2 years, which was pretty amazing,
that's a lot.
Really.
I know.
It's timely thinking back at it. And then so I ended up coming back with Sydney for the last little bit of that season. And then after that, I was over to India with Northeast.
India. How was that? That's what I'd love to know a little bit about that. How did that come about again?
Yeah, I had couldn't say massive interest, but like a little bit of interest from a team after the first season with Sydney. I remember it was one of the boys at Sydney I think it was actually Lafondra, who ended up going over to Mumbai in that first year. He said, there's a club that might be interested in you. Would you be keen to go to India? And I kind of said, I'd rather just stick out this next year at Sydney here and see what happens. But that kind of stuck in my head until, and at that time, I think there was a lot of Aussies who started to go over to the ISL as well. And then once my contract had finished up at Sydney, I didn't have too many options. Obviously, I hadn't really played, so I just needed to get something where I could go out and play. And Northeast ended up coming, and they showed a bit of interest, and I kind of just grabbed it with both hands and said, yeah, let's do it. And it was a pretty tough season for us as well there, but I ended up playing the majority of the games, which was good for me, which is what I really wanted, just to get back out on the park. It was definitely different, though, because we were in the bubble. So all the teams were in Goa because there's still COVID at the time. So all the teams were based in Goa. You're in your hotel. I think the season was maybe 4 or 5 months. You couldn't leave the hotel, only to and from training on the bus. So it was definitely interesting and tough at times, but overall good experience for me in the end.
Difficult situation, no doubt. I mean, hard enough being in a foreign country, but to be in a foreign country in a bubble where you really can't do much. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, luckily I had my study to do online with uni. A lot of PlayStation as well at the time. They had a pool table and a ping pong table as well, so you'd go out and do a bit of that. And other than that, really, you were just training and then recovering. So it wasn't so different, I suppose, to back home or to a normal situation. The only thing was you couldn't go out. So yeah, it was definitely, I think, hard to get used to at the start. But then once the season was going, we were playing every maybe 4 or 5 days, which was good as well. So the games just kept coming and it ended up going pretty fast, which was good.
Yeah, I suppose in between training, recovery, and games. And someone I spoke to a couple of weeks ago, they said when they're in a foreign country like that with not much more else to do, football is your focus. So you can make sure you recover well, that you eat well, and you prepare. And no doubt that'll have a good effect on your football overall.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of plus side to it, really, when you look at it that way. When you don't actually have much else to do, you can just really focus on your footy and your recovery and everything else that comes with it, whether it's gym, nutrition, all that kind of stuff. So that, I suppose, you got to kind of take the positives from the situation and just make the most of it.
And when you went over there, was that a different? It would be a different thing altogether, I imagine. So you have to get new visas, new banking, moving, obviously. And was that something that the club sorted out for you as well, or did you have your agent help you with that?
Yeah, so my agent had a contact with an Indian agent over there who sorted all that for me as well. He was really good in terms of speaking with the club and organising all that for me and visas. I actually got my visa sorted before I left in Sydney. I went to the Indian embassy here and got that all sorted. And I think they sped it up as well, which was good because usually it can take quite a while. And then once I was over there on ground, everything was obviously all sorted and it was kind of just from the airport straight to the hotel, and a lot of COVID tests.
Yeah, I know. I can imagine. It would have been. Did you have to have them ongoing while you were training and playing all the time?
Yeah, at one point we were having them every day, every morning, before we go to training, get a COVID test, and yeah, it's pretty crazy, really. You think of the amount of the rat tests that we used and went through, it would have been thousands.
Mm. And what was the biggest when you landed there then? So you're in India, obviously COVID's there, but outside of that, the level of the football, the facilities, everything, how were they?
Yeah, so it was quite interesting, obviously, because we were in Goa. I think we only played in 3 stadiums there, and all 3 were really, I think, quite good, considering that I think there were 10 or 11 teams playing each week on only 3 stadiums. They did a really good job to keep them maintained really well. The training ground was pretty bad that we trained at, really. It was maybe a 30 minute on the bus ride to get there. Training ground wasn't very good at all. There was no showers. You couldn't shower after training to get on the bus. Go back home. The standard of the football, it was okay. It was interesting. I think definitely in India the bigger teams have the better local players, which you see in a lot of countries as well, which is pretty standard. I think it's definitely improving. It's better than I thought it was going to be. And I think each year it's just going to get better and better. You can see with the infrastructure they've put into the ISL, I think they're doing it really well now. Compared to when it first came in, it was kind of just a league where they were getting massive, big players. You know, Roberto Carlos, Diego Forlan, just giving them a hump of cash to come in, and they'd play, I don't know, 5 or 6 games really. It'd be done in 2 months, the whole season. I think it's turning into a proper league now, and I think probably in the next 5 or 10 years that they'll probably put a lot of money into the league and try and build the infrastructure and really build it up. I think the potential is there for it to get better. But it'll probably obviously be a long process as well, because it's only a new league as well.
And there's who was on? Cameron Watson was on speaking with me a few weeks ago, and he played over there, and he spoke quite highly of it. But he did also mention that they're bringing in a lot of foreign coaches, then coaching the locals over there, which obviously will hopefully, and again, it takes time, but hopefully that'll help, improve the overall game between good foreign players, but then helping upskill and fast track their local players themselves.
100%. I think just about most of the coaches there are foreign, and I think the important thing for Indian football as well will be getting those foreign coaches or better coaches, I suppose, for the younger players in the academies, and from once they're younger, from 12, 13, 14, building them up. Once they get to the professional stage, they'll be a lot more prepared and have a better understanding of the game. I remember one of the Indian players saying to me, because I think I had a conversation with him about tactics and stuff like that and this and that, and he said, bro, look, we haven't been taught that. I'm only just learning this now at this age. I haven't been brought up with that since a young boy, so it's a bit different for us. So it was interesting to hear that, I suppose, especially from one of the players.
Yeah, well, especially if you've come up through just say an A-League youth academy, that's no doubt a big part of it as you get older, is the technical and tactical side. But when you do go to some of these countries, potentially in Southeast Asia, as you say, it could be very foreign to them, that it's just not something they've had the money at the club to do, or bring the right people in to teach them this. So just different experiences all over, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. But I do think as well, it's interesting to see with the way they've been brought up through their academies and whatnot. It also brings a different style of the game as well. And, I suppose no one's to say which one's right or wrong, because obviously you can see the type of players they have over in Southeast Asia and Asia. It's a lot different than the players we have back home in terms of their ability on the ball. They're very technical players, and you could say almost like a street kind of football style. And it's really interesting to see, because you could probably say that a lot of their players may be technically better than we have back home, especially here in Korea and, possibly over in Thailand as well. Technically, they're unbelievably gifted. And that definitely has to do with the way they've been brought up through their youth systems and the way of playing. So it definitely brings a different, I suppose, style of the game for the players once they get to the professional level.
Yeah, it's probably, without all the facilities and money and resources, it's probably less structured, their training over there. And as you say, it's not to say that's a bad thing, because even if we watch some of the Asian Cup qualifiers and Australia might play if it's Qatar or, one of these Middle Eastern countries, technically they do have very good players. But as you say, they might just not have, they'll have a very different upbringing.
Yeah, 100%. And you can see as well in those games, it's not easy for us as with the Socceroos. I mean, obviously we expect, because we have high standards of ourselves to win these games against those countries and stuff, but they certainly don't make it easy. And there's other things obviously to think of in terms of, the conditions you're playing in, the grounds, the heat, the humidity. It all adds up and plays a part.
That was going to be my next thing, is what were the main off-field challenges that you had? And no doubt COVID, being in India would have been the main one, but outside of that, between Thailand, Korea, India, what have you found to be difficult, I guess, to firstly maybe wrap your head around and get in a routine of, but yeah, the off-field side of things, how have you found that and navigated all that?
The biggest thing for me each time, which I suppose will happen to anyone, is kind of just adjusting to the culture, which takes time as well, because, back home in Australia, we're pretty rich in terms of multiculturalism. We've got a really diverse country. We've got a lot of different country. Oh, beg your pardon. How can you say it? A lot of people from a lot of parts of the world living in Australia, whereas you go over there and for the most part, if you're in Thailand, the most part of the population's Thai, or in Korea, the most part's Korean. So definitely just adjusting to their culture and their ways of life, which is what you need to do. Obviously, you're in their country, so you have to try and do your best to respect that and their culture, because it is a lot different to back home. But once you do that, I think it helps as well if you can try and do that, because you earn the respect from the players and the team and the coaches, which is a big thing. And football's a team sport, and that's a big part of it. And I believe it is the culture and the camaraderie of a team. And if you can get that respect from the players, they'll show it back to you. So I think that's a really big part of it.
No, definitely agree. And another player said the same thing. He's in Malaysia, and he said once you get that trust and respect of your teammates, and then the coaches, it makes everything a lot easier. And if they can see that you're trying to adapt to their ways of life, no doubt they'll sort of put an arm around you and help you along the way. In one of the other things that you mentioned was the importance of having someone on the ground that you can sort of speak to and knows the language and that can just get you around. Have you found that at every club you've been at so far? There's someone there, whether it's a more experienced professional or just someone around the club that generally can help you in all these little bits and pieces?
Yeah, I've had that probably with each experience I've had. In Thailand, I had Kane there, and the TD and the coaches who were there who spoke English. Even Dave, who ended up sorting the move for me, he had a bit of experience over in Malaysia himself and stuff like that, so he knew what the game's like over there. Here in Korea as well, it's pretty lucky to have a few other Aussie boys playing here at the moment as well, who I've been able to catch up with and speak with, which is really helpful. And there's a translator here in our team who's been really good and helpful as well. With India, it was a lot easier. I wouldn't say easier, but a lot different, I suppose, because everyone spoke English. So it was a lot different in terms of being able to meet players, learn their names, have general conversations with them at the beginning. Whereas when you're in Thailand and Korea, not as many players speak English. So it's a bit more difficult, I suppose, in the beginning to get to know them on a personal basis.
And does that come down, I suppose, the only way and that we just touched on before, but is by doing the right things on and off the field to gain their respect? And you might find, because like that, you're a foreigner, that then they'll be a bit more welcoming to you and maybe make a bit more of an effort if they can see that that's what you're trying.
Yeah, I think 100%. I think 100%. If they can see the effort from you trying to I suppose, integrate in their culture and understand their ways and be respectful of their culture, they're definitely going to be more welcoming. And I suppose, like you said, maybe put an arm around you and say how you're going, etc., etc. Which is good for you as a foreign player as well to always get that from the locals. It's really important.
And have you found Korea out of the three places you've been? What's been I suppose, the biggest challenges you've had to overcome, other than the language, getting into Korea and getting into that culture and way of life? How long have you been there now?
Yeah, so I've been here for about 8 months now in Korea. I've really enjoyed it. It's really good here. I'm in a really good part as well, which has been lucky at a good club. Songnam's pretty big club historically here. They're one of the biggest clubs in Korea, throughout the 90s and early 2000s, and they're kind of at a moment now where we're in the second division. They're trying to get back into the first division and get back to where they were before. And the biggest thing, I suppose, that's been different for me definitely is the culture here in Korea. I think it's different to Thailand in terms of Thailand is, if you look at it as a country, has a lot of tourism. It's probably one of their main industries. So they're used to having a lot of foreigners and a lot of English-speaking people, and plenty of Aussies I know go there just for holidays. Whereas here in Korea, you don't get that as much. I don't think tourism is definitely their number one industry. So you don't get a lot of people speaking English, whether it's at the club or even if you're just at the supermarket or going down the street. They'll always, I suppose, expect you to speak Korean a bit more. But there are a lot of Koreans who obviously speak English as well. But their culture is definitely, I've found anyway, compared to Thailand or India, very strong here. They're very proud of their culture. So it has been a bit harder, I suppose, to understand that and get used to it. But that's all a part of it as well, which has been good to try and understand that and really learn from what they have and what they see from their perspectives.
And just on one of the things you mentioned there about, say, shopping, right? So you're in a country that if no one's speaking English and you don't speak Korean and you're quite new, do the club help you with that, like the first time or so, or does someone give you a bit of a direction around where you do your shopping, how to pay for it, etc., etc.?
Not really, to be honest. You kind of on your. I mean, I could go to the translator if I wanted to, or if I needed to. He's really good with that. If I was in an emergency or whatnot, I could probably just give him a buzz and he'd get back to me. But in here, Korea, a lot of the things, for example, in the shopping, they've got to pay. You don't actually go through with the lady who's working or the man behind the thing in the counter. It's all on the electronic thing now, and it's got it in English, which is pretty good.
Okay.
But I mean, if you're lost, I suppose you just got to use Google Translate. It's pretty lucky you think about it now, because I always think about this, really, to be honest. I wonder what it would have been like playing here, 10, 15 years ago when you don't have Google Translate on your phone. If you're stuck or whatever, you can just do that. I remember a few months back, I'd forgot my wallet at home, and I went to pay at the counter at a cafe, and I said, "Oh shit, I forgot my wallet here," and I had to call the translator, and he ended up organising an online bank transfer. So I was able to transfer from my bank to the lady who was working at the store behind the counter to pay for the coffee, and then I transferred into her bank account. And I just thought, bloody hell, what would have happened, if you couldn't do that back in the day, or if I couldn't call him to help me out.
I think technology definitely makes it a lot easier now to go overseas and play, even between just FaceTime to keep in touch with family. As you say, whether it be banking, Google Translate, you can pretty much do anything now on your phone. It would make things a lot easier, and it learns a lot of new skills, no doubt, as well.
100%. I think nowadays with technology, it makes it a whole lot easier. Obviously, it's definitely is still hard, but like you said, with FaceTime, I'm on FaceTime with my girlfriend every night and with mum and dad a lot as well. Being able to see them, speak to them, it's a lot easier, than back in the day. You'd be able to call them, it cost you an arm and a leg to call someone back home, and you're sending postcards and whatnot. So it's definitely a lot different and makes it a lot easier, for sure.
We probably jumped ahead to the Korea part, but how did you leave India and go straight to Korea? Was that the move?
No, so I left India, and I still had another year on my contract there. And I wasn't sure whether I was going to stay or not. And I think I finished up that season in March, and I was kind of weighing up whether I could try find something in the A-League back in June or wherever it may be, but nothing ended up coming. And then I ended up getting a call from the club, and they said, look, we don't want to keep you. And this was in September. And all this time, mind you, I had just been training on my own from, say, February, March, up until then. And I ended up getting a buyout of my contract from them. I said, I won't stay. They didn't want to keep me. So I said, okay, we'll move on. And so I was kind of looking then from September until December. The transfer window doesn't open until then. So I was thinking, oh, well, I don't really have much to do. And I trained with my personal trainer, Milos, back home. I'd been training with him just about every day just to keep fit. And I've known him since I was really young, and he's helped me so much throughout my professional career. And he said, look, we can maybe send you overseas to Europe. We have some contacts in Slovakia. We could kind of see how you go. It's in September. It's a bit late, though. So we're not really too sure what might be able to happen. And I hadn't played for 7 months. I'd just been training on my own. So I kind of thought, all right, well, I'll just give it a crack and go over. I think I might have spent 2 or 3 weeks over there, 2 weeks over in Slovakia. I had a trial with a second division club who said they would have loved to have me at the time, but they didn't have any spots because obviously in September it was full. So they said couldn't have you until January. And then I ended up going on trial with another club in the first division, but that didn't go too well. It was unsuccessful. So I ended up, after that, just coming back home and going back to training with Milos again until I could find something.
And those stints in Slovakia, could you tell it wasn't going to be successful? Or did you get a feeling that, one, either the level's different, I don't fit in, or just that they've got a full group? Or did you think something might come of that? And how did those conversations go? Did the club sort of just pull you aside after a few days or after a few weeks?
Yeah, but it was really interesting, and it was quite difficult because it was kind of off the cuff, and everything kind of happened pretty quickly. And I think Milos and his dad Miro were doing me a favour. Obviously, they've known me since I was really young, and I'd actually spoken to them about it when I was younger, at 18, 19, whether I go over and whatnot, but I decided to stay here. And it's obviously a lot different when you're going over to Europe as a 18, 19-year-old. Whereas when you're 25, it's a big thing because especially in a league like Slovakia, they're looking to produce you as a young player and then sell you off to a different league, to a bigger league, and make money from you. Whereas when you're a bit older, they can't really do that. So everything kind of was, I suppose, a bit off the cuff. And they had a contact who was really good there, family friend, and I stayed at his house at the time, and he was the guy, I suppose, on ground there, calling clubs for me, trying to get me some training. And it was difficult. I think maybe even one of the days that I went to train, I think it was with the second division club, they weren't even expecting me to be there. But I suppose for me it was all right at the time. I didn't really mind. I just had to get on with it and just say, just prove what I can do. And I felt like I did that definitely with that second division club. With the first division club, it was a bit different. I feel like the coach as well there, he wasn't really sure whether I was going to be there, or they didn't really know much about me. They're going, well, who's this guy kind of from Australia coming over here? What's he kind of doing? But they were definitely all welcoming. Not to say that they weren't welcoming and stuff like that, but it's just, it's strange. The season's kind of just started. This guy's kind of come from nowhere. But the players and whatnot were all very welcoming as well. And yeah, I ended up playing, I think, a trial game with the club in the first division, and I didn't have the best of games for whatever reason. I just one of those days, I suppose. And after that, they said, "Look, thanks for coming, but no thanks." And from then, I just had to decide whether I wanted to try stay there. they'd said to me, we could probably find you a club here in the third division until January, and then try and shift you to a professional club. But for me, that wasn't really a risk I wanted to take at the time, because obviously a third division club it's only semi-pro. You wouldn't be earning, I don't know, maybe €500 a month if you're lucky or something from the club. And to live off that at my age, it just wasn't really worth the risk. So I decided to come back home and keep training until something came up.
Yeah, it sounds like, and we'll just chat quickly about the South Korea move shortly, but that it can be a lot of limbo, I guess, as well. Like if you're either out of contract or you're looking for new things like that, you could be sent to places and you think it might be all good, but as you say, they've just started a season. The coach probably has a squad. He's trying to focus on what's happening, and then you're coming in. So I know what you mean. It's a bit of an awkward feeling. As much as everyone's welcoming, it can be a little bit make you a bit unsure, and then you just don't know where the opportunities are going to come from. But good experiences, and I guess what it shows is that you just have to go and sort of try these things sometimes, don't you? That's the only way you're going to know.
Yeah, I think especially for me in that position, I didn't really have anything to lose. I hadn't played in almost a year. I'd just been training on my own, and mentally, I needed to go out and try something different and play football. Kind of just to get away from Australia, get out there and just try something, just to be in an environment where it's just footy. I think that's the most important thing. Is for football is definitely, it's not always going to be an easy ride, and it's just going to be up and down like that. And that year definitely was pretty tough for me. I spent just about the better half of 9-10 months just training on my own. Yeah, it was almost a year until I found my next move. And I suppose I did everything that I possibly could have to get that next contract, and that was my only goal. There are definitely times where I thought about just giving it up and just go play semi-pro somewhere and find a job or whatever. Those thoughts definitely pass your mind. I suppose you need a bit of luck as well at the end of the day, which I was pretty lucky to get this move, but I was definitely working really hard and just waiting for an opportunity for that whole time.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of different experiences with different people, is if you just don't give up, good things will happen. If you just keep trying like that, so you will have days where you're like, is it worth all the hassle? I'm traveling all around the world and I'm not getting anywhere. It's probably costing you money in some circumstances. But if you've got that drive and that belief that, I'll just keep going, something will come, then, around the corner, hopefully something will come.
Yeah, I think that's it, 100% for anyone, whether it's in football or whatever, walk of life or whatever you do. You just got to kind of stick to it if that's what you really want to do and that's what you believe in. I believe that if you work hard enough and you put your heart into it and everything, at the end of the day, it'll come back and you'll get your reward. I suppose, and like I said before, you definitely need a bit of luck as well. And once that lucky chance comes, or that bit of luck comes, you got to grab it with both hands, that opportunity, and make the most of it.
And how did you come across this career move then? That's obviously nearly 12 months or almost 12 months of not actually playing football. How did you get that move and how did it start? Yeah,
so when I was over in Slovakia, actually, and towards the end of this, after these trials, and I was deciding what I was going to do, whether stay or not, and I ended up trying with a new agent as well. I thought I might need to try something different. I'd love everything my previous agent had done and whatnot. He was great. He was awesome. But I thought maybe if I try someone else, they might have different contacts, etc., etc. So I ended up doing that. And he was able to, once I got back in Australia, he started obviously looking for me with other clubs again. And there was still another 3 months. I think I got back in October or September until the window was going to open up. So he said, all right, I'll just look for you. Just got to get back training and whatnot. Stay fit, stay ready, because, opportunity can come. And one day, actually, sorry, before that, I just remember now, in December, he said, there's an opportunity over in Vietnam. Would you be interested? So I said, okay, let's go. They organised flights for me to go over, and I tried with the club there. I think I was there for about a week. This is actually over Christmas as well. So I spent Chrissy in a hotel room by myself in Vietnam, which was pretty good. And the club there, they were actually interested to sign me, but they said we can't sign you until June because that's an AFC player. I would have been the Australian AFC player for Vietnam, and they said that rule doesn't come in until June, so we'd have to wait. So I kind of said, okay, well, that's fine, and then went back home. And I think maybe a week later, my agent had called me and said, look, there's a team in Korea that's interested. And I kind of said, all right, let's do it. And yeah, it kind of just all happened pretty quickly, which I think as so often happens in football.
Yeah, definitely. I've heard a few stories now where it's, someone makes contact and within 2 days you're in another country and you're training and playing and ready to go, which is a bit of a whirlwind in itself. And I can't even think of what I was going to ask then before about the career move, but that's what I was going to touch on, the agent and the change of agent, which is quite interesting. How did you come about or go around that, but did you speak to people that had agents, and is it because particular agents have better contacts in different areas, or did you talk to players you knew or the PFA, or how did you sort of navigate moving from one to the other?
Yeah, I think players generally chat about their agents and whatnot, and often these days you can see it online on on the Instagram or whatever, that you can see the agencies and they're posting about their players, and you can see where they've got contacts and whatnot. The football it's interesting because obviously a lot of it is about who knows who. You can't deny that a lot of it is politics. But that's not to say that it's the main thing about it. But for me, I think just at the time, I just needed to do something. I was just thinking of the things that I needed to do to get a new move, and whether I still would have came to Korea is a possibility. Even if I didn't change my agent at the time, it's still possible that I still would have came here. But I just felt like I needed to do something, I suppose, and be proactive and just try different things. And at the end of the day, I ended up getting a move over here. Whether it was because of that or not, who's to say? But I think the thing for me at the time was just I had to try something different and change it, for whatever reason.
And when you're dealing with your first agent, are you under any particular contract with him? Did you have to, obviously you're happy with him, but at the same time, I'm breaking up with you in a way. Like, how did that go of, I want to try something else? Were they quite supportive around it all?
Yeah, I had a really good relationship with my first agent. He was really good, and I think my contract had finished with him even a couple of years before. And he was kind of, I suppose, working with me in good faith and whatnot. He was always good about that, and he never even spoke to me about money or anything like that. He was really good and always supportive of me and whatnot. I think maybe he probably was surprised at the time when I told him I wanted to do this and whatnot. I ended up speaking to him on the phone about it and whatnot. But I think he understood as well. And he kind of just said, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. You can go do that. I'm sure maybe with other agents it may have been different, but I can't really say a bad word about him and the way he kind of was with me.
That's it. Sometimes it is. It's just you do need something different or a fresh start, and whether that's an agent or a club or whatever it may be, but just to give you that kick on to try something else, because as you say, you never know what's around the corner, and it's been good that you're able to get something quick and get across there.
Yeah, 100%. Like for me as well, like I said earlier, the most important thing for me was similar to that position I was in after being with Sydney in the youth team and after Sydney with the first team as well. It was just about getting back onto the park and getting minutes. In football, that's probably the most important thing is to have consistent minutes. And I've learned to know that as I've gotten older. You can be at a really great club, but if you're not playing too much, you're not going to have too much interest from anywhere. The most important thing is to be on the park, and clubs want players with experience and with games under their belt. And that's what's going to allow you to, I suppose, continue in your in your career.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think even that perception, it doesn't matter what league you're in, but if you're playing professionally, whether it be in Thailand, India, Malaysia, but you're playing week in, week out, getting lots of game time, you are a much more attractive prospect than to another club. And hopefully like that, you're just making your way up the ladder to, secure a good deal where you might be comfortable, you might get more money, you might be in a good country. It could be loads of different opportunities, but yeah. And I think you've probably summed it up quite well there with the game time. You've seen all the different avenues of it, of playing, in second division Thailand, but then being in an A-League winning club, but how important the games are, just to be playing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I kind of thought to myself maybe at the start when I was at Sydney, even if I don't play, I'll be at a club who's going to be winning the games and winning championships, so I'll be able to find something after. But, I was soon to find out that I was, very wrong about that, and clubs much prefer players who've been playing, which is understandable as well. They want players who've been playing, and they can see that they've been playing, because when clubs look at a player who hasn't played much, they think, well, what's wrong with him? First of all, why isn't he playing? If he's that good a player, or has he got injury concerns? Is there something else? There's a lot of doubts. So it does go to show that just getting those game times is a massive thing for a football player, for their CV and to present to other clubs.
Definitely, and you can see that playing the games and also taking risks on different things, which is what you've done. You just have to do it, don't you, to make this happen and be a full-time professional somewhere. It doesn't matter where, but you just have to do those things.
Yeah, 100%. I think football or professional sport, in a sense, is probably a really double-edged sword in terms of the job, because you're obviously doing the sport that you love. You get to do it every day. You're with your mates, you're staying fit, you're staying healthy, all these good things as well. But there's also the other side that comes with it. The pressures of playing at a level, professional level. Other things like contracts and stuff like that. Football's not a very secure job. Things can change like that, whether it's an injury, whether a coach doesn't like you, you're not in the team anymore. Like for myself, I had almost 12 months without playing, and that for me, that was 12 months without a job. So you got to think about other things like financial stability and whatnot. It's not easy, especially when you're playing at kind of, you're not at the top level of the Premier League kind of levels, where you can afford to have 12 months off if you want, really. You could play a couple of seasons there and you'd be happy with that. You can go do whatever. So it's definitely, I think a lot of people from the outside, they don't really realise it at this kind of level of professional football. The football is really a high standard still. But in terms of, financial backing and whatnot, it's not all like the Premier League and La Liga and Serie A. We're not all getting paid like that. We're just normal people like you guys working our job.
And on that, because you've been living, I suppose, in countries which will have a lower cost of living, have you been able to, or is that something you plan to? You obviously said you're studying, but do you send your money home and look to invest it or do stuff with it back here to help you for when you're older?
Yeah, that's definitely my plan, to send my money back home and try to invest it in stuff back home for post-career and whatnot. It's actually another problem. It's funny you mentioned that I've encountered as well as a player. I was speaking with a mortgage broker the other week to try and see if I could get a loan to put in an investment. And he said, you might have enough saved up, but banks are going to look at your contract and say, you've got a 1-year deal. What's going to happen after that? It's really hard to convince them, especially if you've only got a 1-year contract, that you can actually go and make this investment. It's a big risk for them. So that's another part that I suppose is difficult, especially when you're playing over here in Asia, because often it is 1 year, 2 year, probably max deals that you're going to get here. And it's another thing to consider in terms of if you do want to invest and stuff like that, things you got to think about.
Yeah, and that's a good point, actually, because, as you say, the banks need to see some sort of I suppose, schedule or full-time work that you can service the loan in a way. And no matter what job you're playing, as great as it sounds to be a professional footballer in Korea, on paper for them, it's a bit risky. So yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. Something which hasn't come up before, but it's something which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing as well, if you're looking to invest back home and you've got you've got a foreign income, that's another thing for them to think about as well. And it's it definitely has been interesting in terms of that stuff.
Well, that's it. And you've got to worry about, different taxes. And we're going to have someone on the show actually to talk about that in a few weeks. So taxes, getting your money home and like that, buying property, whatever it is, it's not an easy thing to do when you're over there. And who do you reach out to for that? Do you speak with the PFA to help you in that regard as a footballer, like as an Australian footballer? Or do you have a support network that you sort of lean on for that type of thing?
Yeah, I've spoken to the PFA. They put me in contact with a guy, Tim Pullman, who's been really helpful for me. I think he does a lot of tax work with a lot of the boys in the A-League locally and overseas as well.
Yeah.
When I was first in Thailand, coming back home, he really helped me with my tax situation because I didn't receive any pay slips or group certificates from Thailand, the club at the time. So I was a bit worried about what I had to do, and Tim was really helpful with that. So he's someone I suppose I kind of have leaned on to help me with all the situation, bringing money back, etc., and what's the best way, or what's the tax, how's it going to affect me, my position, etc.
Yeah, no, it's good working through the PFA, and Tim, he's the one that's going to be he's going to be jumping on soon because like that he deals with a lot of players in a lot of countries along with locally. Very switched on when it comes to that, and it can really help the players when they're overseas to have someone that the PFA recommends to speak to as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, Patrick, this has been a really, really interesting chat, mate. I really appreciate your time, and it just like the overwhelming, I suppose, message out of this is like that. You want to follow your dreams. You need to be playing games, and you got to be taking risks. It's pretty much been the story of your last 7 or 8 or 5 or 6 years, I'd imagine. Like taking risks in different countries that you're unsure of, but going for it and hoping that being prepared and that something and a little bit of luck comes along the way. Yeah,
I think if you sum it up like that, it's probably right. I mean, for me, I've had a bit of an interesting journey. I think looking back on it now, I'm still only 26, so obviously I'm hoping I've got a few more years still down the track of playing footy. I think just for me, the best thing out of it for me is just to be able to do what I've loved as a job, and that's always been what I wanted to do since I was a kid, is to play professionally. And I've always worked hard to try and be where I am and whatnot, and not only for myself, but for my family and for mum and dad and whatnot. What they had to go through when I was younger, and all the things they did to help me out, getting training and whatnot to game and stuff like that. So I think you just need to draw on all those different things to kind of help you. It's definitely interesting being overseas and hard at times, but at the same time, it's an awesome thing. Really, you think about it, how lucky you are. And I was actually out at dinner the other week with Aaron Carver, who's playing over here, and he said, "How weird is this? We were playing together at Sydney 7 years or 6 years ago, however long it was, and here we are in Korea, the other side of the world, sitting having dinner together. It's really strange." And I suppose it's moments like that where you just kind of got to sit back and you think, how good you really have it, and just be grateful for it. And it's really good, the best job in the world, I suppose, at the end of the day.
That's it, and that's one of the drivers behind these sort of interviews and podcasts was letting people know that there are fantastic opportunities out there. Like, it's not going to be easy, but outside of your home country, there are so many opportunities to play football in different leagues, and it might be Div 1 or Div 2, but it's professional, you're getting full-time pay, and like that, it's a stepping stone to somewhere. And lifelong experience in different cultures, different countries, languages, like just, a really, really cool experience while you're fit enough to do it.
100%. I think that you're spot on with that. I think there's a lot of opportunity for boys back home to come over to Asia and play, whether they're in the A-League or even in the NPL, because I think we've got a big talent pool. in the NPL throughout the country, and you can see that in the Australia Cup games and whatnot as well. And I'd advise if boys do have a crack from overseas, obviously you need to be careful and you need to take a calculated risk. You don't want to be going to something that's just going to be an absolute horrific kind of time. So obviously you need to do a bit of research and background on it. But, really at the end of the day, the kind of thought process I had and I've always had going overseas is, home's always going to be there for me back home in Sydney. I can come over here and I'll give it a crack whilst I can. If it goes wrong, I can always go back home. I've kind of got nothing to lose, and that'll, I suppose, be my advice for any players who do have the opportunity to go overseas. Why not give it a crack? If you don't like it, you can always come back home and go back to what you were doing before. Yeah, no, definitely. I couldn't agree more with that. It's a really good way to wrap that up because that makes a lot of sense. I believe in that as well. Home will always be there. Sydney's going to be there. No one's going anywhere. You can come back when the time's right. But until then, go and chase that dream and give it a good go. Yeah, 100%. No, amazing, mate. Thank you again very much for being on today. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Chris. Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me. All right, I've just stopped the recording, but you're still on. Awesome, mate. That's cool. Well done.